Hi everyone, we are back again. Scott and I are back again. And we are back because William, who is supposed to be our keynote speaker, is not able to make it. He, unfortunately, his power left. And he's in America. So it's just very strange. And even in his tweet, he just tweeted out literally just now, saying that he has never lost power before, and it's the first time that has happened. But he's lost power, and so he can't actually join us. And with the Rona, it's not likely he can go to a coffee shop. So for those of you who are watching and expected William, we really apologize for that. And William is really sad about that as well. But fortunately, Scott has offered to do a session with us in the meantime to kind of replace the gap in the schedule. And he's kindly agreed to speak. He's going to be talking about Python and Windows Subsystem for Linux. So yeah, Scott, take it away.
Cool. So will you stay here with me and we'll do it together?
Yes. So I'm going to be staying here on the call with Scott to help him out with the Python aspect of things.
All right, cool. So do you use a Mac or do you use Windows, Marlene?
I use a Mac, yeah.
Okay. So you use a Mac, and a lot of people use a Mac because when Windows people go out and they learn about something online, usually they'll go out and they'll Google for something, and they'll say like, I want to install Redis. And then the Windows person with their Windows laptop goes and they find a how-to page, and it says, hi, go to the terminal, and then they see this. And Windows people feel really sad because Windows people don't have that. They have like this. And when we see that, we're like, oh, whatever the thing I want to install, it doesn't work on Windows, and then they're sad. And while Python has great Windows support, we know that Python lives in the Windows Store, and you can always download it from python.org. Python works great on Windows. Linux and the Linux kind of experience is still kind of really standard, and you might find libraries or native libraries that only work on a Linux kind of an environment. And then you get into things like Docker and containers. The Windows people feel excluded because they don't have that prompt. They don't have that Linux environment, So there's a couple of really cool things that have happened recently on Windows that make Python a nice place to be, and I wanted to show them to you. So the first one is, on Windows, when you open up a terminal, you usually end up with a screen like this. And this isn't as cool as iTerm, right? It's got no tabs. It's not pretty. It just kind of sucks. It's the old, like you would think of this as being DOS, right? You remember learning like DOS on your Windows machine. So the terminal on Windows sucks. And then there's lots of different shells. And people, I think when they're starting out and they get on Windows, they get confused because a console, a terminal, and a shell are all different things. And then they'll go and they'll say, oh, shells on Windows suck, and terminals on Windows suck, and the Windows console's trash. And they get confused about that. So I did a blog post called Shells, Consoles, and Terminals, where I talk about the difference. And I remind people, let's see if my blog is still, there we go, that a terminal, if you remember, looks like that, doesn't it? Like a terminal is a in and out, right? Like terminals were typewriters for a very long time, right? And if I go and run like Python, and it pops up like this on Windows, I'll make it full screen. Python is the shell in this context, right? It returns a string. But did Python paint? Was Python the responsible program that did the painting? Do you want to guess? Who painted the string? Who drew the pixels?
Who drew the pixels onto the screen?
Yeah.
I don't think it's Python.
Exactly. Python returned a string, and a console host painted it. So this string, like the Python is the shell. I type some stuff, and a string comes back. There was no put pixel painty stuff happening here, right? So it's really important to separate the difference between the console and the shell. The console hosts and paints the output from the shell. Now, you've got a Mac. Do you use like iTerm, or what's your terminal?
I just use the terminal that's there on the Mac.
Terminal.app, right? Good. Okay.
Right.
So there you go. So on Mac, you use terminal.app. And on Windows, we have one that's kind of called con host. Oops, the console host. And I think there's a couple of other ones. There's like iTerm and iTerm2, and then there's Hyper. You know, there's different terminals you can go and download if you want to have, you know, cool looking stuff. And on Windows, we have also these shells and things, but there's also, what's the ones on Windows? There's Terminus, there's ConEmu. These are third-party consoles. You see how when I run Python and I hit Properties, this dialog box comes up. This was not shipped by Python. If I run that old DOS box that we saw before, over here, and I open up Properties, look, that one says Python, that one says Command Prompt, but clearly the box is the same, right? So you're right. What you just said is right. Python's not responsible for this. It's just being hosted by it, because Python is not a terminal. It's a shell. Cool? So Windows now has a new thing called the Windows Terminal. It's new and it's open source. If you ever find yourself, you know, hanging out with a Windows person and you see them using the old terminal, you got to say, hey, I talked to Scott and he's got the whole new terminal. It's great. And you get tabs. You can have as many different shells as you want, right?
Wow.
And if I wanted, I could go and find out where my Python is installed. I'm actually looking right here. Here we go. I've got Python here. Okay. I don't know what I'm doing, by the way, so bear with me. Here we go. So I can see where it's installed. Okay. So I'm just going to copy that into the clipboard. And I'll put it over here in Notepad just to keep the location. So there's where Python's installed on my computer. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. So now I know that, and I'm on Windows. I can go in my new terminal and I can click Settings. And I can modify this menu. So I'm going to hit Settings, and it's going to load up Visual Studio Code. And it's just basically a JSON list. Each one of those menu items, I'll make it a little bigger. There we go. Each one of these menu items is a different list, different item in the list there. So let's go and say, make another one. And we'll give it a GUID. And GUIDs are just globally unique identifiers. And they don't really need to be globally unique. They just need to be global enough. So I'm just going to pick one and, I don't know, change a couple of numbers. That's close enough. Okay. And then we'll name it. Oops. Enter name. I think that was Python 3.7? 3.7? Cool. Command line.
I think
we'll do that.
Yeah.
Oh, we need an icon. Always got to get an icon. Oh my goodness. Let's find out where our Python icon is. I have a Python icon. Python. Open location. Wonder where the Python.
So you're using an icon right now for the terminal?
Yeah, so I want an icon, so I get a cool little icon. I basically want to get like an icon like this or something for my menu. It's not important. I'll leave it for now, but we can come back and we can customize whatever makes us happy. So we'll skip that for now.
Right.
We'll come back a little later. Now, under command line, I left it blank. Let's go back over to Notepad here, and let's take this one here. I'm going to change my backslashes to forward slashes, and I'm going to paste my path right there. So I just made a new menu item, and this is how we run Python. So let's go back to our terminal. Notice that I didn't have to run it again. It automatically picked it up. Look. So it just showed up at the top. And now you see it has no icon. So clearly I have to stop everything and get an icon. But the point is that if this works, if I'm doing what I think I'm doing, look at that. Now I've got Python in the new Windows terminal as a first-class citizen. So then I could give this to you, Marlene, and you could put in Anaconda or Jupyter Lab or whatever, right?
Right.
And it's obvious now that these are shells in the larger terminal. Additionally, I could do something like this. Background. I think I can set the color. What's a good color here? That's kind of a, that's not probably good. Let's try red, green, blue. Red, green. A little garish.
Oh wait, that's pretty bright.
A little bright. That's a little bright, my friend. There you go. So now, there's my original shell in one tab. And I can even go and do this. And now I've got my one prompt here and my Python one here. So just in a few minutes on Windows, I'm getting myself set up with a nice Python environment with a very cool new shell. And I can use my mouse and I can scroll and get the big font. I can press Alt-Enter, and now I'm full screen. I don't know how to clear the screen on Python. Okay, so now I'm full screen.
Yeah.
I'm running this on Windows. I can go and modify that, and that's really great. And I could have different Python environments, different versions, like I said, Anaconda, Jupyter, et cetera, and this can be totally customized to look like whatever I want it to look like. And this is all this is all free, part of the Windows terminal, and you can get this in the Windows Store. Now the other thing that I can do, which is kind of silly, and I'll show you this really quick before I show you some Linux things on Windows. Yeah, see, Rob in the chat is saying that this needs to be important. This needs to be made the right away. I agree. This should be the default. Watch this, my friend. I have to use forward slashes because backslashes in JSON are not a good thing. Is that a, oops, should you have a space there? What are you mad about? Oh, that's background image alignment.
The worst. Too specific.
I've got an animated GIF in my Python environment.
Cool. Wow. Hey, Naomi. Hey, girl.
How do you print in Python? It's print with a parentheses, isn't it?
Print, and then in brackets. You need to be in brackets.
There you go.
For yeah.
Cool. So one of the things that's silly about that is I can change those images and the colors and the fonts based on errors of my application. So if I were doing like testing, I could have the Python run its unit test, and then it could show an image or a fun animated GIF that tells me that that thing actually happened or not. So Rob in the chat there is asking if they can have Cygwin bash as a shell. And you can. You can. So Cygwin is a shell on Windows, Marlene, that looks like
yeah,
you probably don't know about that. So Cygwin is when, remember how we talked at the beginning about how Windows people show up on a website that has a tutorial and they see that $sign and they wish they had it. So Rob is saying, can I use Cygwin? Well, Cygwin is fake Linux. It's not really Linux. It's just bash. It's the bash shell and some of the utilities like Vim and things like that. But what people really want is the ability to actually run Linux on Windows, which sounds kind of like a crazy thing to do. Like, how would you run Linux on Windows? Like, usually you write a virtual machine. Do you ever use like Parallels or anything like that? Do you ever run like
sometimes
VirtualBox? You probably don't need to because your Mac runs Python and it works great. And
it's fine for me.
Yeah, exactly. It works great for you. And some people might just run the Python for Windows, which is what I set up earlier. But Windows now supports running Linux natively. And I actually have 5 different Linuxes installed here. And it's not like a virtual machine. Like if you ever use Parallels, when you start it up, it's like, here goes Parallels. And it's like, it's a thing. It's like 4 minutes to start up or something. And it's a big, giant, you know, big launching experience. But if I'm going to launch Ubuntu, let's watch what happens when we launch Ubuntu. 1,000, 2, 1,000. So in 2 seconds, let me close it and I'll do it again. 1,000. We fired up a complete Linux machine in less than a second. Cold it was 2 seconds. Warm it was a second. So let's prove it. Maybe it's a lie. Maybe Scott's lying to us. Okay, look, that's actually Ubuntu 1804.
Wow.
Now let's run
this.
Great. Look, I'll run another one. This is Ubuntu 2004. So suddenly I've got one tab here. I'll color that and make it red. And I've got one tab here. I'll make that one green. That's Ubuntu 2004. That's Ubuntu 1804. This is real Ubuntu. Like there's HTOP. Here's Vim. This is real. So this means that directory structure here is actually my Windows machine.
Yeah.
But I want to go over here in the Linux file system where I have my own home area, right? So we'll make a folder here called Marlene in my home.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then do I have Python installed? Is it like -- version? How do you ask about Python? There you go.
Yes.
So I've got Python 2. How do I get Python 3? How do I install that on Linux, right?
I think you should be able to say Python 3. I forgot it. I'm not sure.
I might already have it. That's a great point. Yep. See, you're right. Okay, cool. And I can actually go and say, I think it's which Python 3? Ah, look at that. We had just learned that we are in fact looking at the location that Python 3 is installed at, which is cool, right? And I want to point out that the location of where I'm at right now isn't Windows. It's this Linux world. And on Mac, you have the thing, it's called I think it's called the Finder. Is that where you look at your files, right?
Yeah.
So we have Explorer. And this is kind of interesting. If I push enter right now, I'm actually going to run a Windows app from Linux. So I hit enter, and it actually pops up Windows Explorer. And it knows it's on Ubuntu. In fact, any Linux that's running shows up automatically in my world here. And that's really cool.
Yeah.
Because if I put a file there, let's go and do that. So let's make a Python file. Now that I know how to print things in Python. Okay. Do you put a semicolon or do you do no semicolon in Python?
No semicolon.
No semicolon. Okay.
Yeah. That's very cool.
No file name. How do you do a file name? What have I done? Let me, oh, I forgot to give it a file name. Sorry.
I see Justin is laughing in the comments because of the Windows comment. That's okay. It wasn't Windows.
It was not Windows. It could have been. Ordinarily, I'm with you. I would 100% blame them, but nope, it was me. I pushed Control W too fast. Okay, so here I do a refresh, and you'll see this. On Windows, I'm seeing the file that I literally just made over in Ubuntu world. So here's where it gets really powerful. Do you ever use Visual Studio Code, or what's your favorite editor?
Yeah, I use Visual Studio Code not for other program, and PyCharm as well for
PyCharm. Okay.
PyCharm as well. But both. Cool. I actually have both on my laptop, so.
Yeah, great. And that's really common. People have multiple different environments. You can see here that I've got multiple Pythons in Linux on Windows. So here we see Python 3.6. Under here is Python 3.7.4 in the Windows world. So you have to keep track of where these things are. But a moment ago, we just made a file here in the Linux world. But I can run Visual Studio Code and press enter. It's actually launching a Windows app. So it's a Windows app. But if you look in the lower left corner here, it knows we're connected to Ubuntu, again, on the same machine. And this isn't just a virtual machine, because you saw that it started in 1 second. Exactly. This is a very integrated environment. Now watch, this is awesome. So now I've got Python, this py file here, and if I look at my extensions, if I want, I can see, do I have Python extensions already installed? Just look at this. So the Python extension, this is a bit of a brain twister, so bear with me here. I'm running a Windows app.
Yeah.
I'm running VS Code, but I'm going to install the linting and the debugging inside Linux, because that's where it belongs, because that's where Python lives.
Right.
Okay, so let's install that. And I want to show you, if we look over here in the extensions, here you go, reload required. So we'll just do a quick reload, forget our extension. And I want to juxtapose, I have 35 extensions local to my computer. And you just saw a moment ago that I do not have Python 3.6 installed on Windows. Inside Ubuntu, I have just 2 extensions. So Visual Studio Code is kind of a client-server application now. The language service lives in Linux. The app runs in Windows. Yeah. Isn't that cool? So Rob is asking in the chat. Yeah, exactly. So Rob is asking, can I make a terminal shortcut to launch the Python shell from a Linux subsystem as a shell? Ooh, this is great. What a great question. I don't know. Let's find out. So if I come out here to like DOS, I'm in DOS or whatever, you know, I'm on Windows. If I type bash, it runs bash, right? So could I type bash Python 3? How do you, what's the command to like tell bash to then run a thing? There's got to be a rule for that. Like let's find out.
Well, usually I think you just say like Python 3 and then the name of the file.
No, but I want to like run the shell, the Python shell. You know what I mean? I want to go and tell bash to launch a binary, to launch. I want to tell, bash is what I do on Windows to go and like run my shell. I think this is bash.
Rob is saying that will do it.
That will do it? It didn't do it though. So let's make sure I'm using the right bash. Okay, so there's bash. Ooh, but hang on. There's also WSL.exe. WSL.exe.
Rob, Rob, who uses Windows, please.
Yeah, so what WSL is the Windows subsystem for Linux. So I think I might be able to go WSL exec Python 3. There you go. I think that's what Rob wanted. So can I make a terminal shortcut to launch the shell directly into the shell? So there you go. So I've just gone and run Ubuntu and then passed in the next exec, which is that. I think I could have also done what we were trying to do, which was run bash and then tell bash to run Python. So it's up to you. Okay, so that's a great question. So basically anything you can ask for, yes, you can do. Now this command line here, this WSL that you had said a moment ago that you're not familiar with, is the manager. It's kind of our command line, and we can say WSL list. I can list out, that's my default Linux, and then I've got a bunch of other Linuxes. This way I can test all my software on different ones.
Right.
Cool? Yeah.
It's
so
cool.
back to here, if we open up this one, remember when we just installed Python inside Linux. And basically, if we go back to Linux, we can run, actually probably not top, let's try htop. See here it says VS Code server. There's VS Code client and VS Code server. So this is really cool from a Windows developer perspective. And all of this is free. All of this is open source. No one's trying to sell you anything. I should be able now. How do I do? Oh, here we go. Now look, it just popped something up. Okay, cool. This is where you're going to help me now. So do I pick the Python 36 one, right? See, look at that. It's actually found them each. And notice the path.
Yeah.
It's actually finding them in the right location. I'll pick that one.
Right.
And then if you look down here, it knows I'm on Ubuntu, and I've got Python there. And then it's saying, well, hey, you want to get PyLint?
Okay.
So if I say install, it's going to go and walk me through all of these things for pip and all those different environments. And I drop down into the command line down here. I can go and apt install or run homebrew or whatever, right? So you might be running homebrew. And then look, I'm getting IntelliSense and documentation for Python.
Right.
So how's it doing it, right? The thing that paints the text is Windows, but the language services, Python language services, the Python linter lives over in Linux.
That's very cool.
When is this mainstream available? Now. It's been available for a couple of years.
Available now.
Yes, absolutely. So you can do this now. I've got YouTubes on it. There's two WSLs. There's WSL1, WSL2. But if you want to run, to be clear, to answer Vince's question for his students, if you want to run Python on Windows and use Visual Studio Code, all of this exists. But if what you really want is for your students to have a Linux experience, what you do is you go into this part of Windows calling turn Windows features on and off. And you just check this box, Windows subsystem for Linux, and you turn that on. You have this on your computer already, Vince, in the question, in the chat there. And this has been around for a while, and it's also supported on Windows Home, which is super important because not every student has the Pro version of Windows. This works on the regular home version. Exactly. So to Rob Brashino's point, all the Python development stuff on crypto libraries, all that stuff is a nightmare to install. Yes, you can do all of that. So the steps are for any Windows. This is great because it opens up Python to any Windows laptop. So Windows features, you go and turn on the WSL subsystem. Then you go and you get the Windows terminal in the store, and that's also on GitHub. You go and you get Visual Studio Code, VS Code, and then Visual Studio Code will walk you through all of this stuff and install the extensions that you need automatically. It's super easy. And then when you want to go and get a Linux, you actually can just go here to the store, and type in, literally search for Linux in the store, as amazing as that is.
Yeah.
And look, Ubuntu and SUSE are just literally in the Windows Store. Now, it might seem like they're trying to sell you something. They're not. The store is just making a tarball of the Linux that you want. And then it just unzips the tarball for you. Is that cool? Oh, and then I think, see if this works.
That's very cool.
Look. So look at that. It's asking me what I want to do. So let's just debug this current Python file. Now look at that. I'm on Windows and I'm doing live interactive debugging to Python, but look at the command line down here, Marlene.
Yeah.
So you saw the environment, Python 3, it launches VS Code Server, and this is the trick. See, it's listening on a different port, and that's how we're communicating with Linux on the same computer over a port. Right. And then look, there's the Python debugger right there, debug py. See? And it launches it listening on a port. And then at this point, I just need to go and install pip and get my linters and stuff. So I need to figure out, you know, which linter I'm going to use and install it and all that kind of stuff. Because right now, it says there's no pip installer. So how do you install pip in my terminal? I have to go in here.
It should be Python 3, I think. Python 3 pip install. Hang on, let me look for my commands.
Let's Google it together, shall we? Install pip Python 3. These are the things that I would have expected. Oh, it's get pip.py. That's what it is. But remember, I'm on Ubuntu, so I'll go and do that. Oh, there it is. Sudo apt. This is great. Now, this is a great example. Look at this. Those dollar signs, remember? This is where the Windows user feels sad. They don't need to feel sad.
Right.
And now, we just go back out here. See? That's going to go off really fast. I love the progress bars on Ubuntu.
Right.
It makes me feel powerful when a progress bar happens. Cool. So now I've got that. Look how nice and fast that was. We go back over here.
That was pretty...
And I think we were setting up a linter, if I recall. Linter, enable linter, select linter. PyLint, install. Look. It's installing it for me inside. Cool.
Yeah.
Look at that. Isn't that great? So now I've got my linter installed. Now what's a good thing that you can do with a linter? What's a silly thing we can type that the linter will get mad at us about?
I'm not sure. Maybe just I'm not sure. Maybe you could run print, but maybe without, I don't know, without the brackets or without the...
See? Look at that. Great point. So I just did it without a quote, for example.
Yeah.
PyLint caught it. Then I can go and click on it, click on the problem. I get the actual information from PyLint, all again living in the Linux world. Isn't that great?
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So that is the correct or the better experience for people who are interested in running Python today, but they want a Linux environment. And you notice down here, I can even run my bash inside VS Code. Great way for people to learn Linux and use their existing Windows machines, because honestly, I think it's fair to say that not everybody running around the continent has the latest MacBook Pro. Right?
That's very true.
So if you've got a random Dell from wherever, you can do this today. You can get WSL and you can be running Linux, and you'll be a much more effective developer, because it's probably Linux that you're going to end up deploying to later.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, no, that's great. And I think for most people, I would say most people on the continent are using not using Macs or Linux. So it's a great thing if this is something that's accessible to them.
Yep, exactly. I see Vince in the questions there saying the linter is in the Linux world. Yes, everything. So all language services, only Windows is printing and drawing on the screen. And if I go File, Open File, I'm in the Linux file system. So yes, the linter, the compiler, the runner, the debugger, all of this is entirely in this world. So when I fix that, and I go and hit F5 and run it, and go and debug that. Now I'm doing live debugging. You can see I got global variables, call stack. That's entirely Linux world. So I could uninstall Python from Windows entirely. I don't even need Python. Right. Because it doesn't live in this world. I'm just using the environment around it. It's really, really nice. VS Code is in the Windows world, yes. Because I'm using Windows. And then, of course, to our original point, remember I can go back over here and I can say explorer.exe. And now there's the Windows file system, and I can open up my Python file, and there it is, see? It's a lovely integrated experience. Cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, does anyone have any questions? I'm not a super big Windows user, but I would love to. I think we actually have 3 minutes left. Any last minute questions for Scott about this, feel free to ask in the comments. I thought it's pretty cool, actually. Yeah, and it seems like a lot of people think this is helpful. I know Vince is saying, so Vince has a question, and he's asking, if you had 2 installs of Python, one in the Linux world and one in the Windows world, would there be a way to clarify which one you're using?
You'll note that in Windows, I've got Python, I think we said I have Python 3.74. Okay, so if we took our Marlene file, our hello py, and I put it over in the Windows world, and I'll make a new folder here called Marlene Windows, and I'll put that file in there. Yeah. I'm just going to make a copy. And now notice that I've got my Visual Studio Code, rather, pardon me, here, and then I'm going to go and right-click and say Open with Code here. I'll put Visual Studio Code on the left and on the right. The one on the right is in the Windows file system, and the one on the left is in the Linux file system. You'll notice over here it says Ubuntu and Python 369. Over here it says Python 3.8.2, and it's on Windows. Now, Rob is saying, can I avoid installing Python at Windows at all? Yes, absolutely, 100%. You do not need to install Python on Windows. Put in Visual Studio Code, do everything in Linux. And when you're in Linux, everything will happen remotely. And even if you want to, you could run it in a Docker container. So you don't even need to install Python anywhere if you don't want to. For VS Code remote containers. And we have a whole topic on doing remote container work. Specifically, if you want to do Python, we walk you through exactly what that looks like and how to set that up. So we have a section on VS Code remote try Python. So if I go and search for VS Code remote try Python, this is a sample we've got up on GitHub. Okay, so I'm just going to copy that to the clipboard. And what I'm going to do is I'll just come out here to Windows, and I'll just come to the desktop, and I'm just going to go and clone that repository. Okay, so I want to point this out. Here's some Python, a whole app. And I'm going to run VS Code. I don't have it installed on Windows. And what's going to happen is it's going to pop up a dialog box in the corner here, and it's going to say, look, This is a development container. Okay, so what we can do is run this inside of Docker. It's going to open this thing up and install all the tools that you want in Docker. Okay, and when we reopen this as a container down here,
Right.
it will, oops. Oh, I have to go and run Docker. I'm not actually running Docker right now. But what will happen is it will install Python into the container, run everything in the container, and you don't have to install Python even inside of Linux. It's just container-based entirely, which is pretty cool. So that is all here under opening in a container, developing a container. And then to the questions that we had about VS Code runs here, VS Code Server runs here, Python lives and works and runs over on this side. Okay. Yeah.
That's very cool. Well, that's,
Rob is thinking about doing the same thing with PyCharm. If PyCharm wanted to do this, they could absolutely do that.
With PyCharm?
But I think we also, Marlene, as we wrap up here, we want to just say good luck and apologies to folks that we're looking forward to talking to William right now. He's doing his best with his power situation. And it's unfortunate. Let's see what he's got, any more power back. Yeah, it looks like he hasn't been back up in about 48 minutes. So he's in a tough situation there, but we'll hopefully see his stuff soon, uploaded as offline talk.
Yes, exactly. But this has been really great. And I think this has been super informative. If you're a Windows user, this is the session for you. And I think it was really helpful, at least to the people, to Vince and Rob. I think a lot of people in the comments benefited from it. So thank you so much, Scott, for hosting this last minute feature, this last minute session for us. And yeah, Scott, as usual, I think Scott is super friendly, everyone. Yeah, no worries. I did so much work. I did very little and and just was not super helpful. Sorry, guys. But definitely, if you have any questions for Scott, he's super friendly. Feel free to reach out to him on Twitter or wherever. Yeah, this was a great session. Thanks, everyone. And Scott, I don't know if you want to say anything before we close.
Our love and support to William as he gets his power back up. And again, apologies if this wasn't the talk you were expecting to see, but we appreciate you. And then I'll leave you now and go back to sleep. And I wish you have a lovely day, Marlene. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.